My name is Vanessa Maitland. I'm a maritime archaeologist and I work on shipwrecks and maritime landscapes. So I was asked to come and look at the underwater cultural heritage around Shark Island. So it involved the shipwrecks as well as terrestrial heritage that may have found itself into the water. So first I did a desktop study of all the potential shipwrecks that could be here. Then I did a magnetometer survey, which looks for metal objects under the sea. I don't know what they are, I just know they're metal. And then we did diver searches, not only on the magnetic anomalies, but also on the shoreline along Shark Island, looking for artifacts that may have come from the concentration camp period, as well as human remains. So there's not a lot of recorded shipwrecks in Namibia because there's not a lot of people that lived along the coast to report the historical shipwrecks. So most of our information comes from the 1800s and onwards, from when people were actually living in Lüderitz. There are a lot of unrecorded and unreported shipwrecks that I believe will be found along Namibian coast, a lot. Specifically in Lüderitz and Walvis Bay, because they were the only natural harbors that the the old seafarers would have come into looking for food, for water, and to repair their ships or get away from storms. So I think the potential for maritime archaeology in Namibia is huge. So we found quite a few shipwrecks, or 17 shipwrecks that are reported in Lüderitz. But we didn't find that there was a high likelihood that many of them would be in the area under development. Nevertheless, we undertook a magnetometer survey to look for metal objects. So shipwrecks, even wooden shipwrecks, have a lot of metal in them and they can be picked up by a magnetometer. And then we were looking for artifacts that could have been thrown off the island, like manacles or other restraints that the prisoners had. Were restrained by. So we found a few small anomalies along the eastern edge of the area, so the western edge of the island. And then we went to go and do searches. So we attached a GPS to a buoy and we dived inshore and then slowly worked our way offshore, looking to see what we could see. And we checked the 3 anomalies that we found, but we couldn't find anything there. There was silt and sand, so it may be buried underneath. The magnetometer doesn't only find the stuff on the surface of the seabed, it also sees stuff under the seabed. We didn't find any remains that were associated with the concentration camp. So while we found modern debris, found bottles, tires, cables and conduits, and some of the 2022 shipwreck, we didn't find any manacles or anything like that. Doesn't mean they're not there, but it's unlikely that they'll be found. We didn't find any human remains, and one wouldn't expect to find any. It's been 120 years of a very rough sea with a lot of creatures that clean up our ocean. So I believe that so there is a little island on the north of Shark Island that was used as a smallpox quarantine zone. So I believe that if anywhere, that should be a sensitive zone, because they wouldn't have wanted to come and remove those bodies. So the birds would have fed on them and stuff, and they would have probably collapsed into the gully between the Shark Island and the little island. So I think that's a high sensitive area, and I think that along the entire northern side of the island should have a 20 to 30 meter buffer zone where there's no development, just to protect anything that may be there. It's archaeological best practice to leave remains in situ until such time as you have a decent research question you want to answer, or for whatever other reason you may need to excavate there. But leaving it in situ is best. The second thing is, I think that a museum should be placed on Shark Island that tells a story not just through. So there's a number of items on the island. There's an old metal pole that John Kinahan, the archaeologist, found that is probably part of the fencing. That's a very evocative artifact. They found a historical photograph of one of the inmates breaking rock, and they managed to tie that and find that spot where that was, and that they found the actual chopping marks in the rock. I think that's a very evocative artifact of the past. I think it's very important that the story of the concentration camp and the genocide be told. I don't think it should be forgotten. It's a traumatic national event that has impacted and still impacts people today. There are people that are alive today whose grandparents were victims of that. So it is still within living memory. And I think that those stories should be told, whether it's through oral presentations, that could be multimedia, through images. There was a lot of photographs from the period. There's the stories. The British came and they took down first-hand accounts of it. All of those stories could be part of a museum and a place of memory, not just for Lüderitz, but for Namibia as a whole, because it's one of the sites that's still it's isolated in a way. So it hasn't been swallowed up by the cities or the towns or, other developments, and it can be kept whole as a place of memory for the entire genocide. The third thing I think is that all the stories so far told from either a white African experience or other Africans, but all people removed from it. I think the story should be told by the people that were impacted by it. And I think a scholarship which encourages Herero and Nama kids to go to university, study history, and then write the story from the perspective of the affected people would be beneficial. So it's reclaiming ownership of the story.